I stood inside a private jet, wrapped in white silk. A wedding dress I didn't buy. About to marry a man I didn't even know 2 weeks ago. Outside the window, clouds rolled by like waves. And inside, my heart beat louder than the engines. He stood just a few steps away. Tall, sharp, distant. A billionaire. Born into power. Raised behind gates. And living in a world where love is currency, and trust is a liability. This wasn't a fairy tale. This was a transaction. 1 week. Pretend to be his wife. Smile for the cameras. Keep up appearances. Collect the money. But plans fall apart. Especially when your heart forgets the rules. Because now, with the vows rehearsed, the ring on my finger, and his eyes on me like I'm something more than a contract, I'm not sure what's real anymore. And the hardest part? It's not pretending to be his wife. It's pretending I haven't already fallen in love with him. And walk away. No feelings. No strings. No future. That was the plan. But plans fall apart. Especially when your heart forgets the rules. Because now, with the vows rehearsed, the ring on my finger, and his eyes on me like I'm something more than a contract, I'm not sure what's real anymore. And the hardest part? It's not pretending to be his wife. It's pretending I haven't already fallen in love with him. Before we start this incredible story, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from our viewers around the world. Just 3 weeks ago, I was nobody. A name on a forgotten resume. A waitress in a dusty cafe tucked between steel buildings. Someone people barely looked at, unless their coffee was cold or their toast came late. Every morning, I'd wake up to the sound of my alarm. Not because I was excited to start the day, but because being late meant losing $10 off my paycheck. And $10 was dinner for me and my mother. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in the outer edge of the city. The kind of place where the ceiling leaked every time it rained, and the landlord conveniently forgot to fix it. My mom, she's been sick for months. The bills kept coming, but hope, that stopped showing up a long time ago. There were nights I cried silently while massaging her swollen hands, knowing the prescriptions were too expensive, and payday was still 5 days away. I had dreams once. To open a flower shop, to design things with beauty and color. But dreams don't pay hospital bills. So I worked, double shifts, late nights, smiling at customers who never remembered my name. Until one day, he walked in. Not the billionaire. Not yet. Just a man in a suit. Polished, quiet, observant. He didn't order anything. He just watched. I thought he was creepy at first. But the next day, a card came in the mail. No return address. No signature. Just a note. You've been selected for a private opportunity. Discretion required. Meet at the address below. And with it, a prepaid black car outside my building. I thought it was a scam. Part of me still believes it should have been. But desperation makes you brave. Or foolish. Sometimes both. So I went. To a glass tower that scraped the clouds. Where the air smelled like money. And silence was louder than conversation. That's where I saw him for the first time. The billionaire. He didn't look at me like most men do. He didn't smile. Didn't flirt. He just studied me. Like I was a contract. Or a solution to a problem. And then, without introduction, he said the words that would change everything. I need a wife. For 1 week. You'll be paid $1 million. But you must agree. No questions. No contact after. No complications. My first instinct was to laugh. Then, to leave. But then I thought of Mom. The unpaid bills stacked on our counter. The pharmacy that no longer accepted our promises. And so, I stayed. And asked just one question. Why me? He didn't answer. Not that day. Instead, I was handed a folder. A non-disclosure agreement. And a pen made of gold. And in that moment, somewhere between logic and survival, I signed. What I didn't know was that I wasn't just agreeing to be someone's wife. I was signing away the version of myself I had always known. Because what came next was more than private jets, designer gowns, or luxury hotels. What came next was the most dangerous thing of all. Feelings. Before the jet, before the dress, before the contract that tied me to a stranger for $1 million, there was just me. Plain. Broke. Invisible. I grew up in a part of town most people only see from the window of a train they never get off. My father disappeared when I was 8. No note. No goodbye. Just silence, and the crushing weight of maybe he'll come back. He never did. And my mother, she did her best. Worked 2 jobs. Smiled through tears. Held my hand when there wasn't enough food, and told me bedtime stories that always ended in hope, even if reality never matched the ending. I was a quiet kid. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because life taught me early that no one really listens unless you have money, or power. I had neither. But I had dreams. Big ones. I wanted to open a flower shop. Not just because flowers were beautiful, but because they didn't pretend to be anything they weren't. They bloomed, or they didn't. They lived, or they wilted. Simple. Honest. Unlike people. Especially the man I fell in love with when I was 21. He was my professor's assistant. Charming. Smart. The kind of guy who always seemed to know what to say, and how to say it. He told me I was brilliant, special, different. He told me he loved me. He also told me to invest my small savings into a sure thing. A crypto scam disguised as a startup. By the time I found out, he was gone. And so was every cent I had saved for college, for my mom's medicine, for rent. That's when I stopped believing in romance. Stopped believing in happy endings. Stopped trusting. So when the billionaire offered me a deal, cold, clean, without the mess of emotion, it felt safe. He wasn't pretending to love me. He didn't care about my past. He just needed me to wear a ring, smile for the press, and pretend to be his wife for 1 week. It was business. But business with him was unlike anything I had imagined. Our first rehearsal dinner was at his penthouse. The kind of place that makes you feel poor the second you step through the marble doorway. He didn't greet me with warmth. No small talk. No compliments. Instead, he handed me a binder. Each page had a schedule, a script, a breakdown of every public event, every outfit, every question I might be asked, and how I should answer. We control the narrative, he said. Authenticity is an illusion. Appearance is everything. I remember staring at him. At his watch that probably cost more than our apartment. At his hands. Calm, precise, like he never fumbled, never feared. But there was something in his eyes. Something broken. A flicker of loss, like maybe he wasn't as untouchable as he pretended to be. He never smiled. He barely looked at me. He was polite, but distant. Professional, but cold. But then came the first public event. A gala in honor of his company's merger. He gave me a dress to wear, couture, custom-fitted, more expensive than anything I'd ever owned. He walked me in hand, our faces trained in fake intimacy. Whispers followed us. She's so beautiful. Where did he find her? He's finally moving on. I didn't understand that last part. Moving on. From what? Later, in the car, I finally asked. And for the first time, his voice wasn't sharp. My fiancé died 2 years ago. Car accident. Same week we were supposed to get married. I didn't know what to say. But I didn't have to. He turned his face to the window and whispered. I stopped believing in love after that. Something shifted in me. Because as much as I tried to keep this fake, the pain in his voice felt real. Over the next few days, we rehearsed our story. How we met. Our first date. What I loved about him. What he admired about me. Each answer was scripted, controlled, practiced. But somewhere between the lies, we started laughing at things that weren't in the script. Sharing memories that weren't part of the contract. He told me about his mother. How she used to sing old jazz songs while brushing his hair as a child. I told him about my mom, and how she still made me tea every night, even when her hands ached from arthritis. He started looking at me differently. Not like a solution. Not like a product. But like a person. And that terrified me. Because the moment you start seeing someone as real, you open the door to feeling something real. And I wasn't supposed to feel anything. But I was already falling. The script said we should be in love. So we acted like it. Publicly, at least. He held my hand when cameras were near. He leaned in like he adored me. He brushed a kiss across my temple at staged moments. Each one rehearsed. Each one perfectly timed. But when we were alone, it was different. No smiles. No touching. Just silence. Heavy and stretching between us like a glass wall neither of us dared to crack. And yet, cracks began to form. Not in the contract. Not in the schedule. But in us. It started with a single night. A storm rolling over the city. Winds howling like wolves outside the windows of his glass penthouse. The lights flickered. The air turned cold. And for the first time, he looked human. He poured us both a glass of wine. Not because it was part of the act, but because he needed someone to sit with him in the silence. I asked him what scared him most, and he said, being left. Again. Not in a dramatic voice. Not as a confession. Just a quiet truth that hung in the air like breath on cold glass. After that night, things began to shift. He started joining me in the kitchen when I made tea. He'd ask about my mother. About the tiny apartment I used to call home. About my favorite flower, and why I hated roses even though they sell the most. I told him roses were too obvious. Too expected. Too perfect in their pain. He laughed. Actually laughed, and told me I was a contradiction in the most beautiful way. And when he said that, I didn't know whether to smile or run. Because this wasn't supposed to happen. He wasn't supposed to know me. And I wasn't supposed to care. But feelings don't wait for permission. They creep in through glances. Through shared laughter. Through silent moments on balconies where nothing is said. But everything is felt. I remember one night in particular. A charity gala at a luxury hotel. The theme was Enchanted Winter. And I felt like Cinderella, walking into a ballroom made of crystal and frost. He reached for my hand just before we walked in. Not for the cameras. Not for the illusion. But because, in that moment, he wanted to. The room was filled with people. Politicians. Investors. Socialites with laughter like champagne bubbles and smiles that didn't reach their eyes. He introduced me as his wife. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a lie. He kept looking at me. Not just looking, watching. Like he was seeing something new. Or something he forgot existed. Later that night, back in the elevator, he didn't let go of my hand. When the doors closed, and the world outside fell away, he turned to me slowly. No words. Just breath. Just closeness. He brushed a strand of hair behind my ear and whispered, "You make everything feel different." And I felt it. That weightless, terrifying flutter. Not the kind you get when you're pretending, but the kind that shakes the ground under your feet. He leaned in, and for a second, I thought he'd kiss me. But he didn't. He pulled back, because even though we were pretending, something real had started to bloom, and neither of us was ready for it. But just when I started to believe, just when the lines between fake and real began to blur, it happened. One morning, I woke up alone in the penthouse. He had left early for a meeting. I wandered into his private study, a place I was never invited into. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened a drawer, and there it was. A photo, framed, tucked face down beneath a folder of documents. A woman, smiling, wearing a dress almost identical to mine, in a vineyard I'd never seen before. She looked just like me, and suddenly, the truth hit me like ice water. This wasn't about me. This wasn't random. He didn't choose me because I was different. He chose me because I looked like someone he lost. A replacement. A ghost. A living shadow of a love that died before I ever walked into his world. I backed out of the study, hands trembling, heart pounding. Everything we shared, every look, every laugh, every moment that felt real. Was it all because I resembled a memory? That night, I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, and wondered who I was. Without the illusion, was I still his wife, or just her stand-in? I didn't go home, because home didn't exist anymore. I found a tiny cabin 2 hours outside the city, owned by a retired couple who rented it out in the off-season. No internet, no cameras, no headlines. Just silence, and trees that didn't care who I had pretended to be. For the first few days, I slept. Not the kind of sleep that rests you, the kind that numbs you, that makes you forget where you are, who you were, and why it hurts so much just to breathe. I didn't cry. Not at first. It was like the pain had settled in too deep to rise. Like my body was holding grief in its bones. I made tea every morning, just like my mom used to. But I didn't drink it. I kept looking at the steam, waiting for it to spell out answers. Answers to questions I never thought I'd ask. Who was I when no one was watching? Was anything real? Or was I just another woman lost in the shadow of someone else's story? I replayed everything, every glance, every touch, every word he ever said to me. Did he mean it? Was there truth in the way his voice softened when he asked about my dreams? Or was it all just performance? The hardest part wasn't the lie. It was the almost. We almost fell in love. Almost told the truth. Almost became something neither of us planned for. But almost doesn't comfort you when you're alone in the dark. One morning, I sat on the porch as the sun rose behind a thick curtain of fog. A letter in my hand, one I'd written over and over again, but never sent. Dear you. That's how I always started it. Because I didn't know how to say his name anymore without feeling the bruise it left. The letter was never finished. Because how do you explain to someone that their silence hurt more than their betrayal? That being left without a goodbye feels like being erased. A week passed. Then 2. I didn't hear from him. Not a call. Not a message. Not even an apology through his assistant. I thought he would try. Thought maybe he'd fight. Even just a little. But billionaires don't chase ghosts. And maybe I had become one to him. My mom called one evening. She didn't ask about the mansion, or the private jet, or the headlines that had started to die down. She just asked if I was eating. I told her the truth. For once, I said I didn't know what I was anymore. A bride, a liar, a fool. She said, "Sweetheart, even diamonds break under enough pressure. But they're still diamonds." I cried after that. The kind of crying that leaves you empty, but strangely light. And that's when I realized something. I had been waiting for him to come back and fix what he broke. But maybe he couldn't. Maybe he was as broken as me. And maybe he had never learned how to say, "I'm sorry," to the living, because he'd spent years whispering it to the dead. That night, I took off the ring, the one I never wore for love. I placed it in a small wooden box, wrote 2 words on a note beside it. "I forgive you." Not because he deserved it, but because I needed peace more than I needed answers. Forgiveness isn't always for the other person. Sometimes, it's the door you walk through when you're ready to come back to yourself. I started walking again. Not toward him, but toward something else. A version of me I hadn't met yet. I called an old friend and asked about the flower shop we used to talk about. I told her I had a small amount of money saved. Enough to start something small, but real. She said yes, without hesitation. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled. Not because someone told me to. Not because it was part of a script, but because I finally felt like I was stepping out of someone else's dream and into my own. Narrator voice, 45:00 to 55:00, redemption or revenge arc. Background, low, slow ambient music, like sunrise breaking through fog. Gentle piano blends with a steady rhythm of resilience. Redemption doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or closure wrapped in gold. Sometimes, redemption begins with dirt under your fingernails. With early mornings. With whispered prayers. With the decision to build something no one can take from you. I opened the shop 3 months after I left him. It was small, tucked on a quiet street in a neighborhood where people still smiled at strangers. Where no one knew who I had pretended to be, only who I was becoming. We called it Second Bloom, because that's what it felt like. A new beginning after the withering. A rebirth after a long winter. I poured myself into every detail, choosing the scent of the candles, the arrangement of lilies in the window, the handwritten notes that came with every bouquet. I didn't have a business degree. I didn't have connections. But I had heart. And this time, it was mine to give. Not rent. People started coming. First curious neighbors. Then brides-to-be. Then a woman who cried when I gave her peonies because they reminded her of her late sister. We weren't just selling flowers. We were healing through them. And piece by piece, I was healing too. Music begins to swell, hopeful and strong. I started sleeping again, eating again, laughing, not the polite kind. The kind that starts in your chest and bubbles up without warning. I stopped looking for his name in headlines. Stopped waiting for apologies that would never come. Because I had finally given myself what he never could. Freedom. Self-worth. Peace. But fate has a wicked sense of timing. 6 months after I opened Second Bloom, he walked in. No cameras. No press. Just him. In a simple coat. Holding a single white rose. For a moment, my breath caught. Not because I still loved him, but because I didn't know what I would feel when I saw him again. He looked older. Not in his face, but in his eyes. tired. Like the weight of pretending had finally crushed him too. "You look happy," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. I nodded. I didn't owe him words. But I gave him honesty. "I am. I came to say I'm sorry." He placed the rose on the counter. And for the first time, he didn't try to justify what he did. Didn't blame grief. Didn't mask it in logic. "I used you. I thought I could control everything, even grief. But you were never her. And you were never mine. You were too real." I didn't respond. Not right away. Instead, I looked at the flower. Pure. Delicate. Honest. "You don't owe me anything," I said. "But I'm glad you came." He asked if we could talk. Go for coffee. Try to start again. And I looked at him. Really looked. At the man I once thought could save me. At the man who broke me with silence. And I realized something. I didn't need saving anymore. "I wish you peace," I said. "But I'm already whole." He nodded, quietly. Tears in his eyes that he didn't wipe away. And then he left. No scene. No begging. Just the sound of a door closing gently behind him. I stood there for a long time after he was gone. Not grieving. Not aching. But still. Because I had faced the person who once broke me. And I didn't fall apart. That's redemption. Not revenge. Not punishment. But becoming so whole. That their absence feels like a clean breeze. Not a wound. I went back to arranging flowers. Sunflowers today. Bright. Bold. Unapologetic. Just like the woman I had become. Because love stories don't always end with a kiss. Sometimes, they end with a woman standing on her own. Stronger than ever. Wiser. Unshakable. And that is a story worth telling. The shop was quiet that evening. The sun poured through the windows in long golden streaks. Dust danced in the light like it had nowhere else to be. Everything felt slow. Still. Whole. I watered the orchids. Lit a jasmine-scented candle near the register. Straightened a thank you card left by a bride we'd helped last weekend. And then, I just stood there, breathing. No rush. No ache. No more pretending. People had started calling me, the flower girl with the healing hands. Funny, isn't it? How they saw something in me I never thought I'd grow into. Not long ago, I was standing on marble floors, wearing a diamond ring I never earned, in a mansion built on silence and secrets. Now, I stood barefoot behind a wooden counter, smelling like roses and rainwater, knowing exactly who I was, and exactly who I wasn't. Then the door opened, and a little girl walked in. Brown curls, gap-toothed smile, a pink backpack too big for her tiny frame. "Hi," she said shyly. "I need flowers. For someone brave." I crouched down, heart caught in my throat. "Who are the flowers for, sweetheart?" "My mom," she whispered. "She's learning to smile again." I helped her pick yellow tulips and lavender, the kind of bouquet that said, "Hope," without ever saying the word. As they left, her mother turned and met my eyes. Eyes that had once known the same kind of sadness mine used to. She didn't say anything. She just nodded. And I nodded back. Two women, strangers, who somehow understood each other completely. Later that night, I sat by the window, cup of tea in hand. Stars blinking above like old friends. And I thought of him. The billionaire. The man who taught me what heartbreak tasted like. And what healing demanded. I didn't hate him. I didn't wish him back. I wished him peace. Real peace. The kind that doesn't hide behind money or control. And I hoped that somewhere, in some quiet part of his life, He remembered me not as the woman who looked like someone he lost, but as the woman who helped him remember how to feel. Sometimes, love doesn't end with a wedding, or a perfect kiss in the rain. Sometimes, it ends quietly, with one person choosing themselves, and walking away whole. I used to think happy endings required a prince. Now I know. They just require courage, and the decision to love yourself louder than your wounds. That 1 week, that fake marriage, it shattered me, but it also gave me the blueprint to rebuild. Not as someone's wife, or someone's fantasy, but as me. And in the end, that's the real love story. Not the one with the billionaire. Not the one with the mansion. Not even the one with the ring. But the one with the mirror. The one with the girl who came home to herself. And this time, she didn't need anyone's permission to bloom. I didn't fall in love with the billionaire. I fell in love with being free.